Thanks very much for having me. I think you're absolutely right. It seems as though Kılıçdaroğlu and Erdogan are really neck and neck. And that's despite the fact that, as you said, you've seen consolidation of authoritarian rule, at least in the last 10 years. Since the Justice and Development Party, his AKP, came into power in 2002, they were initially on a democratizing path, but you've seen jailed journalists, opposition parties in jail, rollbacks in women's rights, Kurdish rights, and the economy in collapse. So the fact that there's only a few percentage points that seem to separate the opposition and the incumbent is quite surprising.
So why do you think the opposition hasn't performed well? He's this elder statesman man has garnered the support of quite a number of parties.
So it's the case that the opposition hadn't been performing very well until relatively recently. You have this opposition coalition of ideologically diverse 6 parties. You had some personal power struggles amongst them. And as you said, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is not the most charismatic politician. He's not a firebrand like Erdogan is. But following the earthquakes in February, I think that the opposition has come together with really united messaging, a very calm, inspiring, and motivating message, which is in direct contrast to the really polarizing, divisive rhetoric that Erdogan has been using. I think voters are starting to believe that they can put their faith in the opposition coalition, that it's time for a change, and that this is really a referendum on the future of Turkey's democracy.
Yeah. You know, when you consider what happened after the earthquakes, and particularly what seemed to be a lack of preparedness ahead of the earthquakes, do you think that has been the single most damaging thing for Erdogan?
I think the single most damaging thing has been the absolute rollback of democracy. I think the economic crisis and the government's mismanagement of the economy, particularly the low interest rates that are meant to boost growth, but have led to skyrocketing inflation, where people can't buy, basic groceries at the market, but you see the ruling party enriching itself. I think those have been some of the major issues. I absolutely agree that not only the mismanagement of the earthquake in terms of slow search and rescue effort response, in terms of slow and uneven humanitarian aid provision, but also the crony capitalism that was baked into the Turkish political economy that meant that the construction business that fueled economic growth in the first few years of AKP rule meant that there were buildings without permits, meant that there were buildings built in regions that they shouldn't have been. So many more buildings collapsed than should have, and that really exacerbated what was already a massive humanitarian disaster.
Do you think Erdogan, if he is defeated, would accept that, as we talked about this increasingly authoritarian rule? Do you see him accepting and handing over power should he lose?
To be honest, I don't. And I worry about the consequences. I worry that, it's incredibly impressive that the opposition has been able to put forward this contest that they have. But Erdogan has signaled that he intends to stay in power. He's already kind of using language along the lines of, if the opposition wins, this is a Western-sponsored political coup, that this is the work of terrorists that the government has partnered with. And there he's referring to Kurdish political actors whom he and his nationalist electoral alliance partners have tarred with this terrorist brush. He also has sort of an existential need to stay in power in order to avoid prosecution for the ways in which he and his partners have enriched themselves during their time in government. So I don't see him going easily, and I see him using all the tools in the authoritarian toolkit to try to stay in power.
Yeah. Do you think after this weekend there will be an outcome, or could there be a runoff?
So this is the question that everybody is speculating on, and it's really difficult to trust polls. It's also difficult to know what he's going to do. My instinct, because the opposition is using this phrase, let's end it at the first round, we're going to win at the first round, and because Erdogan and his party have made such a point of trying to delegitimize the opposition, that one of those two sides, if not both, is going to try to declare victory on the day of the election on Sunday. It's possible that it could go to a second round, but I think that there's going to be someone who declares victory, and then there's going to be contestation from the other side. That makes me worried about the potential for confrontation between those two sides.
Yeah, it's a very, very delicate time. Lisel, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.